You guys see this? We drank all this on the podcast, episode 169 with Charley Crockett. Lone River Ranch Water, the best seltzer, not lying, not bullshitting you, that we've ever had. Truly White Claw.
Get rid of them.
I'm not pointing at George here. I'm just saying get rid of it.
Get rid of them. We're talking about 100% agave, natural lime juice, 80 calories, 4% alcohol, straight out of West Texas. This is what cowboys drink, ranch water. Right?
Honestly, it's 4%. It's less than a Bud Light. You can drink probably 36 of these and be pretty functional as long as you're not operating a car, boat, bicycle, whatever.
Submarine.
Yeah, just drink them. LoneRiverBevCo.com will get you all the locations. You can get it delivered, order it. I mean, I think they have what's it, Drizzly? All those
Drizzly, yeah.
Foxtrot, all those places where you can get it. The flavor, though, real quick, I'm going to go off script here. The typical seltzer tastes metallic to me. It tastes like dog shit. I don't like them. We make fun of it on Twitter, as you guys see. This, to me, tastes like lime juice, tastes like carbonated.
A little bit of a tequila soda lime.
That's it.
Lime. Tequila soda lime. Boom.
And look at it. And it's a 12-ounce can.
Look at this thing. Beautiful.
Look at that.
Texas.
Look at that.
Longhorn.
Look at that.
Agave plant.
You want that.
Beautiful.
Texas. Look at agave. Texas, agave.
A little bit of a river. I think that's what that is right there. Come get it.
Goes on your shirt. Beautiful. LoneRiverBevCo.com. Get it. Love it. Drink a bunch of them. Charley Crockett was amazing. This is where we drink all these.
We drank all of these.
Episode 169 with Charley Crockett. Charley, thank you for joining us. Where are you at right now? You're in Texas?
Yeah. Well, thank y'all for having me. Yeah, I'm in South Austin,
Nice.
Texas, doing my best to get out of town here as soon as we put this record out tomorrow. I'm heading from New Mexico. I gotta get out of the city.
New Mexico on vacation, or are you going to play a couple gigs or something like that?
Well, we don't got no gigs. I guess you could call it vacation. I mean, maybe this whole pandemic is a forced vacation for me.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But just wanting to get out of town a little bit. I mean, I tour for a living like a lot of these people you talk to. I'm used to being in a bus with a 5 or 6 night a week schedule, and usually like all this interview stuff that I'm doing in the middle of a foundation of a different city every night, sound checks, radio station appearances, all that type of stuff. So like my life is built around, everything is built around the kind of circuit. And when that's gone, like I got this album release and it's like the thing that I'm used to it all being built on isn't here, So I'm not, as much as, yes, I live in Austin, it's usually a place that I'm not in very often,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like whenever I'm here, it's like, dang, I ain't been here in a month. I'm going to go see all my favorite bands play, And now it's like I'm here all the time and there's no shows. I don't have any shows, so I'm chomping at the bit to get the hell out of town.
Right. And the new album, Welcome to Hard Times, a fitting title for what's going on, as you just kind of mentioned with the touring and all that. And typically when we have a guest on, we don't want to talk about stuff that they can read on the artist's website because the backgrounds are all there, the bios or Wikipedia pages. But with you, we were both talking, I don't know if we've ever read a story that was more compelling and more incredible or more unique than your kind of journey to get to where you're at now. I don't know if you want to give a short breakdown or what, but I don't know. For us both, we were kind of like, we've never heard anything like that. Just to give people a quick, backstory a little bit, like you've been everywhere from living in New York City to overseas in Paris, that you had heart surgery in 2019. You had a lot of stuff going on. And now you're this up and coming country superstar out of Texas. Kind of how did the whole story start for you in New Orleans? Obviously you lived there as well. And it's a very interesting background. Do you want to kind of give people like a shortened version of it?
Yeah, well, I'll say, people over the years tend to look at my story and I think just assume that it can't be true. It can't be real because in this era, it sounds unusual, the background that I have. But the thing that I usually tell people is I'm like, well, how many street performers have you seen make it off the street to where we're at right now? In this era, not very many. You know, back in the day, it was almost the only way you got here. You know, I mean, Hank Williams started out on the street. You know, he did. Most all the big blues guys started out on the street. You know, I'm from rural South Texas. I'm from the Rio Grande Valley. The area that I'm from, off of Texas 100, on an old rural route, still looks like it did in 1984 when I was born. And that's what I carry with me in my life. And my mama moved us up to Dallas because there wasn't opportunity down there. And my daddy wasn't around, so I spent a lot of my time with my uncle in New Orleans because I think my mama felt that I needed to have that male role model in my life that I pretty much, besides my uncle's influence in New Orleans, I only got in organized sports in public school, which I'm sure y'all can understand. They've been around, you know, for a lot of young men in America today. I think coaches in organized sports are the first place you get that, which is what was true for me. And then a lot of family hardships caught up to me real quick, you know, getting in all kind of legal trouble in the crime world with my brother who, you know, didn't have a high school education, you know, who was kind of forced to hustle based on his situation. Like a lot of other people that come from poverty in America, you know, you don't know what you're going to do, you know, until your back is against the wall. And so I don't fault people in America from any background coming out of a difficult situation, bending the rules to get where they're at. Now, I do view that differently from people who come from the opposite side of society. It's not the same thing. But that being said, those circumstances brought me to where I'm at in my life. You know, circumstances and hard living is how I ended up on the street. It wasn't like, you know, I was some type of guy with a day job or, you know, going to music school or something that was playing on the street for fun. You know, I was playing on the street to survive, to get by. And I was disillusioned by the game as it's set up to play from, you know, the way that, the hand that I was dealt. And street playing led me to playing in bars. Bars led me to, you know, they're hearing about me in Nashville, you know, through playing in Texas. And I was able to get connected with John Folk at Red 11 right there in Nashville, Tennessee. 30 Tigers picked me up right after that. And I've applied everything that I learned from the street to making records. You know, I used to be out there on the street corner or a subway platform or a train car, hitchhiking, riding trains, sleeping on farms, squatting in warehouses, sleeping in parks, staying up all night, and then sleeping in parks during the daytime. Those are all things that I did to make it in music. And everything that I did to learn how to make money playing out of a guitar case, all of those things apply now. Like I'm in a bus right now, but everything that I did on the street prepared me for where I'm at today. And that's how I look at it. You know, like literally my bus will be parked, you know, in the same neighborhoods, damn near the same corners I was playing music on, you know, standing out there with my guitar case a few years before, you know. And so really, I guess it's the same as it was when I was playing in New Orleans in front of Cafe Du Monde. There's just, I got a bigger team. I plug my guitar in and there's more politics, but I'm still the same guy, you know. And I think it shows through when people listen to me, no matter how unusual or wild or far-fetched I sound. I think whenever you start singing and whatever you start singing about, even if the whole goal is to try to fool people, man, people can feel that from you without knowing anything about you. You know,
Yeah.
You can't hide in your music. You just can't hide in it. There's no way to hide.
No.
You know.
What's the street or busking culture like in New Orleans compared to New York City, compared to Paris, compared to Morocco or Barcelona or the cities that you've been in? And how does the crowd respond? How is the the police respond, how like
In Chicago, you got to get a permit. I assume that's the same for a lot of places. You got to get like a permit, right, to play on the subway tracks and stuff.
Most everywhere you're supposed to get a permit. You don't. Now I haven't played on the street for a good 7 or 8 years now, and so I know that and everything is tightening up. But like in New Orleans, you didn't need a permit, and the permit wasn't what you really needed to worry about because it's just more about the competitiveness and holding down the good spots, you know. And so like on Royal Street, they would close the street would close down at 11 a.m. and they would keep it blocked off from like 11 to 4. And the really popular spot, Rouse's, in front of Rouse's on Royal was basically impossible to get because a family band headed by this woman named Doreen, they call her Doreen the Jazz Queen, was a family band, and she basically owned that spot, and they just stayed there and had always somebody kind of there. And then other spots you moved down from there were all competitive, and the further away you got from the best money spots, the easier it was to get them. You know, so I'd stand out there. What you'd end up having to do is get out there at like 7 in the morning and stand at that spot and just hold it, not leave that spot until they put the barricades up to close the street that day. And then that's how you'd hold the spot down. New York, same type of place. If you're playing on like the Metropolitan Avenue stop on the G train in Brooklyn, which is the Brooklyn only train below the L, that's a highly competitive spot. And you'd have to wait to get that situation, and it would be really difficult. So I played it at first in stations where there wasn't a lot of money and nobody cared, was trying to compete with me, you know, and that's how I kind of got better. And then, you know, you just work harder and spend all your time checking spots over and over. All right, there's somebody right now. I'm going to run to this other place, hit this spot, come back again, and just like check over and over again. It's all about consistency and just staying on it, you know, and like really working it and having confidence and being good enough that when people try to come up on you, you're holding the crowd. You're confident enough that they're not going to try to just run you off, because if you weren't any good and you weren't confident, you could just get your ass run off, you know, really easily. Paris was different. Paris was harder to deal with. Whenever the cops ever showed up, you had to disappear, you know. So they'd come and run you off, and then you'd go away and come back 20 minutes later and do it again until they showed up again.
Do you speak
There's not
French?
nearly the
Do you speak French?
Un peu. No, not a whole lot. I know.
You could pass.
I know
if you took the hat off, you kind of like a lot of French guys have like
They're fashionable.
Yeah, they have like a look, and like I could
Yeah.
definitely see you if you had like not the cowboy hat, but I went to France or Paris with my wife a couple years ago. I loved it, but yeah, it's got a New York City feel, right? Like you kind of get that, but the people are a little different. I could see the police being a little different as well, like you say.
Yeah, it's just like it was different there. The way that I fell into it was like, if I would have known that the language barrier was going to be so difficult, I was in Denmark at the time playing on the street and in clubs. This guy from New York City, this Danish jazz singer, he brought me over to Denmark, to Copenhagen, and I played in all these clubs, and it was all above my pay grade at the time, man. I was so rough around the edges. The only reason they let me play in those clubs is because I was American and unique. But I really didn't have any business being in those clubs. And so that only lasted for about 6 weeks. And I fell back into street playing, which was that's the funny thing, too, is like how New Orleans was. You think you want to play in the club. The club seems like a more legitimate gig, right? Well, unless you're a touring artist, like at the level we're at now, where you can sell tickets at Tip Patinas in these big venues, there's no money to be made in a bar. There's so much more money to be made in the street. That's where all the money is. There ain't no money in the bar.
Crazy.
And it was like that even in Copenhagen. There was very little money to be made in like Mojo Blues Club, the little coffee houses around town. They were cool places, and you get a meal and they give you some drinks, and there'd be some young pretty girls or whatever in there and stuff, but there wasn't no money.
You know, weed too, right? Would you get free weed in Denmark? Would you get the free weed in Copenhagen back then, or no?
Very easy to get in the autonomous little region there of Christiania.
Yeah.
If you've ever been there, you just go into this area and it's kind of everywhere. That was a bonus.
Yeah.
But I never had to worry about necessarily getting stuff like that for free because I was always generating cash, you know? But what I was saying is like in Cope, even like as soon as I got out on the street in Copenhagen, I was making like 4 times the money. And I like, you know what I mean? Like they weren't even really paying attention to my ass in the damn venue in Copenhagen, but on the street, well, I was a hot commodity. But I got tired of Denmark, man. It's I love that plant touring there, but it's not, there's not a lot of eclectic culture, like vibrant, like street vibrance. It's very, I don't know how to explain it. It's
too clean. Right?
It's too dang clean, man. It's hard to identify.
But they're always, Denmark's always, I think almost every year, the happiest people in the world, the cleanest place. Like everything is like, it's almost like too good to be true, like Truman Show in a way. But people that live there forever are like, it's different when you live here forever. You don't feel like, oh, like you don't experience the high taxes or whatever. When people like talk about moving there, I think that's when it gets more confusing. You're like, oh, why would I go move to Iceland or whatever, where the taxes are insane? But it's like, you're like, no, when you live here, you kind of see why it is like it is. But like, that's pretty amazing that you were there, Paris, where you said Morocco, right?
Too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you got a great mix of cultures though, when you kind of take all of that into account, right? Like the places you've been, you put that together and you come back to America, like
citizen of the world. That kind of,
that's a true American dream though. You did it. You worked the streets literally. We're in Europe, came back. Now you're doing podcasts and doing big name interviews and have another album coming out. Playing the Opry. Yeah, I mean, that's the true American dream, right? And real quick, like I think for us, in our upbringing is like anybody who has it easy, to me, you can see it, and they just don't work as hard. They don't. I don't think we would have Whiskey Riff right now if we both grew up privileged. I just don't think I would have been like, I got to start my own thing. I don't think I would have ever done that if I grew up easy. If life was easy growing up, I would have never, ever started my own thing in college and then after college and then with this. Like, I think there's something to be said for the way you did it. And I think that's one of our favorite things about artists that do it their own way and do it the hard way. And I think you're like literally like an embodiment of the American dream in a lot of ways. So it's pretty incredible. And did you pick up stuff along the way in each of those places? And even like we mentioned just a second ago, Morocco, and you said Barcelona, was it Spain or somewhere in Spain? Or
yeah, well, see, like when I thought about it, you know, it's like, look, I thought Denmark was a great city. I don't have anything bad to say about it, but I realized why I was so drawn to Paris. Number one, it was my mama's favorite city. I knew she loved it. I spent a lot of time growing up in Louisiana and had a lot of Louisiana heritage. And so Paris was fascinating to me. And when I look back at it, even just talking to y'all right now, the cultural diversity and the excitement and all the things happening on the street, and like, man, I fell into street playing and found my lane in street playing with the help of gypsies, because the gypsies were the ones playing for tourists that let me get in, like playing in front of the first place that I learned to play. Because like when I got there on this bus, as soon as I got there, it dawned on me that like I couldn't speak French, and I was like,
shit,
so far from any place that I'd ever been. I was worried,
right?
And I got nervous, and I ended up getting like stuck at first. So I was just sleeping in parks, and I couldn't find a place to play. And I remember I went to the Sacré-Cœur, which means the Sacred Heart Church, and it's this one big hill that sits in the middle of town. And I found that, and actually it was a Algerian dude on the bus that told me to go there. And it took me like a week of bouncing around the city before I found this place. And I found the church, and there's just oceans of tourists sitting on these huge steps in front of the church that overlooks the city. Big tourist trap.
Yeah.
Well, I had this guitar with me, and there's all these gypsies standing over on the stairs that are playing for these tourists or whatever. And they ended up inviting me kind of very quickly to play with them. And
fiddles, accordions and stuff.
They were playing actually, believe it or yeah, well, there were a lot of gypsies playing accordions on the trains and stuff, in the metro and in the train cars, which was really cool. There'd be families like carrying a baby around. They would run the baby by you in your chair and then try to get you money or whatever. Which I don't know. I have respect for it, you know. Like I have respect for that. But I mean, it's you talk about a crazy lifestyle. It'd be like that kid growing up, like panhandling in a train car. Like I want to know where that kid is right now. But you know, they were playing a lot of American music actually for these tourists. So I think they saw like, well, this is an American dude. You do it and get these people's attention. And then when you get their attention, we'll switch you out and we'll jump back in. But they had other things that they were doing. I mean, there's a lot of street hustles that people can do with tourist crowds that you're not thinking about, that other ways they're making money off of people, that I was being brought into for them to do, that I only realized once I was playing. I saw what was going on, and I didn't say nothing because I was getting my cut for making my little money. But Paris was amazing for me because I couldn't speak the language. I'd already been playing on the street. But then my only way to communicate and make money with people that I couldn't speak their language was music. And so where I was already a street player, like I always say this, it was like the old me, the false person in me that didn't know who they were, that person died. And he never came back. And all of the doubt, all of the questions about, can I do this? Am I going the right way? Nobody that I was ever related to besides my mama ever thought I could do this. Like, once you make it on the street in Paris and can eat and be in that culture and find a way to thrive, I just had no fear anymore. And real quick, the way that I ended up in Morocco was real simple. Is that I had overstayed my visa in a trip. I don't know how easy you can do this anymore, but the trick is what you do. You go into countries like Morocco, like on a ferry down into Tangier.
Yeah.
And then when you come back up, because it's like a simple ferry, you want to take, like flying, they're really looking at those passports.
Right.
But when you're just traveling places like on ferries or over trains and stuff, it's easy for them to flip over it and not realize, like if you've got a lot of stamps, if you've overstayed your visa, and if they don't and they stamp you, then you're clear. So a lot of people would be in Europe doing their thing, overstay the visa, which you're only supposed to be there. You know, Americans can go, at least before, you know, a total of 6 months, and it's only 3 months at a time. So you can go 3 months, off 3 months, go again 3 months. So it's 6 months out of the year that you can be over there. It can't be continuous. So one way you get around that is you leave the country, you come back in on a train or like a ferry over the Strait of Gibraltar or whatever, and if they're not paying too close attention, you get that stamp and it renews over, and then you're back in that country on a good standing. And the countries like Spain and France, at least 10 years ago, were like a little bit more bureaucratic and like not as computerized, and it was easy to slip through. But that didn't end up happening for me, actually, because I went down there, but these guys were willing. I met this guy in Paris, this guy from Guinea who worked for Amnesty International, who offered me a ride down to West Africa, and his car from Paris was going to drive me all the way down there. I only had like 200 euros, and he said, just give me the 200 euros and I'll just take you. Long story short, we get down there into Morocco, and we're at this consulate for this small country called Mauritania. And Mauritania is the only country that you can drive through. If you drive into Africa from Europe, you have to go through Mauritania at the southern part of Morocco to get into the rest of Africa, because the Algerian border is permanently closed. Permanently closed because Algeria doesn't recognize Morocco. They're like in war with each other. So you can't, that's a permanently closed border out in the desert. So we have to go to this embassy, this consulate, and they wouldn't stamp my visa. And so it was me, the African dude from Guinea, this French Egyptian dude, and this German guy. They all got their stamps real quick, and they wouldn't stamp mine. Those dudes waited for me about a week, and they just were holding my passport, and they left me in Rabat. That's the capital city of Morocco, and which is a good ways down into Morocco. It's not anywhere near the ferry up north. It's like hours and hours into the country. So long story short, I ended up like, I burned up all my money waiting another week beyond them to try to get this transit visa. Never got it, and said to hell with this, and met these Israeli guys that were having similar problems to me at the consulate, and they were like, man, you got just ride the train to the very southern part of Morocco, catch a taxi to this town of Tiznit. It's on the ocean. It's like nothing you've ever seen. And I just, in those days, I was just crazy, and I would go anywhere, you know. And I went there, and I ended up going to that village on the Atlantic coast, and where the Atlas Mountains reach the ocean. And I met people there, and I ended up living up in the mountains inland from there for like 6 months, just living on these farms in these isolated valleys with people living in homes that looked like, adobe homes that'd be 1,000, 500,000 years old that you might see ruins of in like the American Southwest, And anyway, eventually I tired of my isolation. After about a year and a half of being outside the United States, I came to miss America in a way that I never thought possible because I had never really been away from it. And the desire to build an audience in my native land became so loud in my head that I couldn't escape it. And that's when I returned. That's when I returned to America, and I started playing on. That's when I started playing. I'd never played inside subway cars before I was in Europe. When I got back from Europe, like I told you, I didn't have any more fear about anything, and thought things that I thought were cool in the New York and the New Orleans scene. I saw that the people were it was a bunch of pretenders. I saw it was a lot of people that were just on the scene, and like, I'll tell you this about art and music in America. Once you get too deep into the scene, it has nothing to do with music anymore, which is why I've never associated with a scene or cliques or anything. And the street playing protected me from that. And I literally basically went right from the street into having an agent and a label. Is a long way to get there, but like, I never did it by playing the game the way that these people told me to do it. They were never right about how to play the game, at least from my standpoint, and I still treat it that way. And y'all were talking about coming from a background. Like, if you're coming from a background where you got it easy, why are you gonna fight?
Right.
Why are you gonna fight? That's why they say the best fighters time and time again are people that have nothing to, like, I'm talking about boxers that train. It's because they don't have anything to fall back on. Because why the hell are you going to go into the ring and take those chances and take those beatings if you don't have to? Like, some people are just crazy and they'll do it, but more often than not, it takes somebody that, I'm not saying desperation. It's not desperation. It's somebody that says, I'm not going back where I came from.
Yeah. No plan B.
Yeah, and so I'm like, people. So I don't know. People, I've heard people in the country music refer to me as the Muhammad Ali of country music. And I am a fighter, man. I've had to fight to stay above ground. I've had to fight to stay out of prison. I've had to fight not to lose my citizenship just by the trouble I was getting in my own family. And I'm not saying I've had it the hardest, but when you read sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, like, sometimes it is, and that's why I'm here, like, I didn't get into country music and touring like I do and making 8 records in 5 years because I, life was a layup for me. No, sir.
Do you like, I feel like you're such an enigma of an artist, like country and then blues and jazz, a little bit of R&B in there and all these kind of things. Is that a product of your experiences traveling abroad, or was that more of that's Charley as a person in the soul? Because you're also kind of a enigma of a person in a way. You got a little bit of Jewish ancestry, relative of Charley Crockett, a little bit of black ancestry, Creole. What did I say? Davy Crockett. What did I say? Charlotte. Oh, sorry, Davy Crockett.
Yeah, he's related to me.
Creole, Cajun, white, black, Jewish. Like, is that how that all just came together? Is it in the blood, part of experience, or is it everything together?
Oh, it's everything together. It's everything together. Like, I'm from South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, same town as Freddie Fender. That's a 93% Latino community, the area of Texas that I'm from. And it's a place that it's kind of like Appalachia without but it's not seen as a national treasure because the Latino communities are often, of course, marginalized. We know this. you know, I'm somebody that is majority white, mostly white, always marked it down, but like the Jewishness was something that like not raised in it, but you know, like ethnically that it's there, you know, and I dealt with it with my mother and the things that even mentioned in that growing up in the South, like what came with that as a kid. You know, my own heritage, like through my grandmother and my great grandmother, it's trace amounts, you know, when it comes to the African, but it's enough that like I can go back on ancestry.com and see these people like in my great grandparents' generation that are like marking down black half the time on census records and white the other half because they're mixed. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not somebody that can claim to speak from a place of mixed heritage, but what I think it does speak to, honestly, is that maybe whiteness in the way that it's explained by people is like, I mean, how in your own families, it's like you hear the stories in any white family of like Native American heritage 2 generations back. You know, my half brother and sister are both 8th Chickasaw, you know, and that's some, you know, and almost anybody that I know, when you look back a couple of generations, a lot of these constructs of what whiteness means are challenged by people's own like heritage that's just not known a lot about. So, you know, the era that I'm raised in and how I viewed myself, and then living and playing on the street and going to extremely diverse schools. Like my heroes in popular culture, a lot of them were not white. You know what I mean? Like athletes were mostly African American. A lot of the biggest music that influenced my life that I could look to, that could relate to a struggle that made me feel better about my path, were African American. You know what I mean? Like the big music star from the town I was born in is a Latino man by the name of Freddie Fender. And they were, you know, itinerant, seasonal, you know, farm workers migrating around the country by season. And I think it speaks a lot to our generation as millennials and younger, and how, you know, our viewpoint of ourselves as American is far more eclectic than maybe that used to, not even maybe, than like how it has been described in the earlier generations. And that's uncomfortable for a lot of people that don't have to face that stuff or don't ask those questions to themselves. But I think it is all those things together, you know, for me. And I am somebody that, like, in the world, especially from like a wider country audience, looks at me as another, you know, like looks at me as this strange looking dude with a cowboy hat. You know, I get the Steph Curry Ed Bassmaster comparisons.
Oh, I never, you know,
throughout
I never heard the Steph Curry thing.
Steph Curry, me too. I've never
heard that, but
then I should.
Is that a bad thing? Is that a bad thing? Is that a bad thing?
Oh, not necessarily. Some people, I take it as a compliment from some people because he's so talented and handsome.
Yeah,
but other people,
guy.
Oh yeah, but other people, but it depends on where it's coming from and how it's coming from people. Yeah. A lot of people, it's an undertone about. I think some people mean it in a prejudiced way. Other people mean it in a positive way. It just kind of depends. But it just, whenever you get in front of America, and they see you all the time, like, people project what they see on you, you know. And like, I'm not saying I'm a victim of that. Like, I'm in a way I'm asking for that by being out here, you know. And like a lot of people view me as white, but not white in like the golden retriever way that like a whole bunch of these cats standing next to me.
That's a bird like, white, yeah.
It just looks different, you know, and that's not something I expected. I didn't expect that to be such a central issue to like my identity in front of people. But like, you know, nothing comes out how it looks. And I do blend all these styles, you know, and I think a lot of it probably has to do with part of the way, my attitude, the way that I talk and act. Like, that's more ambiguous than like a lot of people from different backgrounds. Like, I have different ways of speaking growing up, depending on like who I was dealing with, you know, and I think that says a lot to do with like how I was raised, the schools I was going to, the communities that I was involved in. And maybe that's uncomfortable for a lot of people that aren't around that, or earlier generations that like don't know what it's like to like have like a street demeanor that you develop from living on the street, and like another way of speaking towards people that you feel like you've got to be proper towards these people so that they don't feel uncomfortable around you, and vice versa. And, you know, that says a lot to my identity and like maybe to my generation, but a lot of it is street living, man, because, you know, the only people that I saw on the street that weren't playing music, you know, were homeless people that a lot of people had addictions and all kind of stuff, you know? And so most of the people that you see out there living like in the transient street culture aren't necessarily people on their way to selling tickets, you know, in venues like I have, you know, like a lot of the people that I dealt with on the street had afflictions or like drug and alcohol problems that they could not overcome. And a lot of those people were the most talented, you know, folks I'd ever seen, you know? So I'm unique in the standpoint that I come from that actual background and made it this far, you know, and I've had advantages. Like my whiteness is an advantage compared to if I try to do all the same things that I did on the street, but I was a dark-skinned black dude.
Right.
There's no way all the doors that were open for me and the breaks that I caught in the prison system and all these things would have necessarily smiled on me as kindly as they have, you know. We used to get hassled by the cops all the time, and they without a doubt hassled the black dude standing next to me almost every time more than they did me. And I had the rap sheet. So, you know, anyway, but I digress.
No, that's all right. I want a quick, funny gypsy story. My parents were actually from Croatia and Serbia, the former Yugoslavia, and then my sisters and I were all born here, but they came here in the 80s during the communist time. So we all shared, myself and my two older sisters all shared a one bedroom growing up. And then if I was misbehaving, my dad would just come in there and be like, if you don't shut up, the gypsies are going to steal you out of the window in the middle of the night. They're going to take you out.
I've heard,
and it worked, man. I was just the best
gypsies
kid
over there.
No, it's just like you're like, oh shit, like the gypsies are gonna steal me at night. Like I'm not fucking around. But it was just
like, man, the stories about gypsies in Croatia when I was living on the street in Europe were like nothing I'd ever heard before.
Oh yeah, it's great stuff. But you actually mentioned something I was gonna ask you. You had a quote in 2015, I think, and you said you learned more from bums and crackheads than you ever did in school. I think it was like the Dallas Observers, or I hope I didn't get that wrong. But one of the
no, they took that out of context.
Oh,
which
did
was
they?
Strange, but I did say that in context. What I meant is that the things that those people taught me about like life and singing,
right,
and stuff, had more to do with me overcoming the obstacles to make it to like where I'm at to where y'all are interviewing me than almost anything that I picked up in school. But I definitely did say that.
Yeah, I loved it. I didn't know if it was how the whole interview came about, but it was so old, 5 years old. So but it stuck out for me because we kind of look back at college as such a waste of money for us. Because for me, especially, I kind of went through the 4 years of always knowing that like this, I know what I want. I know I want to work for myself, and I know I want to do my own thing, and I know I'm creative. And I felt like the entire time throughout college, I wasn't given that ability to be creative and create. You know, so you just kind of finish and you're in a bunch of fucking debt. And you're pissed and you're depressed, and then you're like, oh, now go get a job, and the job sucks, and then you're more depressed.
Job market sucks.
And then you drink more because you're like, fuck it. Like you party with your friends more because you can't wait till Friday. I don't want to look at Friday as a day of like celebration. I want to just have every day be an exciting day to work. And school is a funny one because I felt like we both felt that. We kind of finished and we're like, I honestly, maybe I got better at writing a little bit here and there, but overall, I feel like my upbringing and fighting for things growing up and fighting for things as an adult were much more of the fucking driving force to start a business like Whiskey Riff and have it succeed. Because at the end of the day, I know for a fact that we work harder than any of the other country sites. Like, I just know we do. So, like, I just know that. I know we work 24/7, 365, and I know they don't. And when I put my head down at night, if I even put it down, I know we're winning already, if that makes any sense. And I feel like you have that too. When you know you're working that way, playing those shows, playing on the street, playing all that, you got to feel that, right? Like you have that in your back pocket in terms of your soul. It's like, good luck. doing it the way I did, because it's something that a lot of people can't kind of match when you talk about authenticity, which is something we always talk about as the most important aspect of an artist that kind of we like is authenticity. That's it. You said at the beginning of the show, it's like you can see through the bullshit every time. Every time.
Oh, it's easy to see. Like, one of the reasons that I think I stayed on the street so long is because I was playing all day. Like, I could just play all day, man. I literally played 8 to 10 hours a day for years. And the way that other folks typically do it is like, they get a rehearsal space and they put a band together and they get gear and they go and they book gigs at like these entry level venues that are, you know, you're told these are the places that you're supposed to come into the business, right? And it's not that I didn't want to get those gigs, it's that they weren't available to me because I didn't have those resources. So in playing on the street, I realized, I'm like, wait, if I'm here playing 8 hours a day, when I show up at those blues jams and those open mics at night in New York or New Orleans or whatever, after playing all day, I am like, these people waiting all day to get up on stage at this venue to showcase their stuff. Maybe they've been practicing in their room or whatever, right? But I've been performing in front of the public on the street all day long. So when I would jump up on stage, it was like, you know, what do you think is scarier, jumping into a subway car full of people who don't want you to be there that's moving, you know, or like standing in front of like 15 college kids that all are trying to do the same thing as you in a bar, you know? Like it just became that I had no fear about a care or in the world what they thought about me. And you know, because and I still feel like that now. It's like I always have to remind myself, it's like I'm not playing for what people out there in the business necessarily may think about me. You know, I live by a, you know, by honest and moral principles, but like they don't set them for me. I set them. And the people that I'm playing for, the people that are listening to this music, that it has some effect on their life. I'm not playing to win over the approval of people that may just look at me as a competitor, you know, that are trying to do the same thing or whatever. It's not that I don't honor them or appreciate those people. Like whenever I run into somebody that I think is truly great, I'm going to be a big supporter of you, you know, but I'm not going to just support people that I'm not affected by because I think I need to. And I think a lot of that comes from making myself on the street corner. Like there's a venue. I mean, I can name venues in all these towns across Texas, Austin, Dallas, New Orleans, New York, any of these kind of places. But in New York, I'll give you this one example. I've said this a lot of people that ask me about this. At one point, I realized playing like on the Metropolitan Avenue stop in Brooklyn, not in the train cars, but like just sitting on the platform. Well, I started thinking one day about like all the people that I was like, how many people am I like playing for throughout? If I'm here for like 3 hours, like how many people am I reaching or whatever, right? Well, let's just assume that I got myself a little gig at Rockwood Music Hall or Pianos, you know, down on the Lower East Side or whatever. These are the entry level places you got to go play. And people who come to see you, they're supposed to mark down on a piece of paper when they come through and get their ticket. I came to see Charley Crockett. And if you don't get 20 people to mark down that came for you, that venue won't let you come back for 6 months. That's a weird pay to play game. So you can imagine if you're a street dude, nobody knows who you are and you can't promote yourself, you can't play that game. Well, let's just say that I was really good at playing that game somehow, and I could get 100 unique people to come into that venue 30 nights a month. What is that? 3,000 people? I was playing for 3,000 people in a few hours on the subway.
Right.
You know, and nobody told me to do that. And that's what I would say about school and all that kind of stuff is it's like, is school setting you up to make your own way, or is it setting you up to get a job? It's probably setting you up to get a job in most cases. Now, what's that worth in 2020 America looking at this future in 10 years? Maybe there ain't going to be no dang jobs. So,
not
like,
the paper it's printed on.
A lot of times, I think I'm not here to tell people that have degrees that it's not valuable. That's not true at all. Yeah. If you can put the work in to get a degree, that says a lot about being able to do a lot of stuff that there's a bunch of people in this country that wouldn't even try to, even if they had the opportunity, right? So what it says is that degree says, look, I have work ethic, I can do these things, I can show up, right? But we know that in America, most people end up in fields that have nothing to do with like what they went to school for. Now, that doesn't mean school isn't valuable. It's just the question is, what kind of drive do you have? What are you fighting for? You know, what are you trying to make for yourself? You know, and anyway, I sound like some kind of, you know,
I'm jacked up. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
no.
like
boxing
fired up.
coach.
Preaching to the choir, man.
Yeah, I mean, this is
Yeah, I'm
the
just
way we
preaching
are.
to the choir.
I mean, we're like, I think our biggest frustration a lot of times is this type of stuff with people. It's like lazy people, like people that want stuff handed to them, people that don't want to roll up their sleeves and get dirty.
Well,
and
especially too in music. Like, I mean, we've definitely seen plenty of artists and even some in the mainstream who are like,
a lot in the mainstream.
it seems like they just half-ass a lot of things. They try and show up, hope they get a radio song. They're gonna write for a radio hit. That's it, and no conviction, no thought behind that. Maybe even
I mean, real quick to bring this up because I think it kind of leads right into it. Is we were talking about all your influences, whether it's country, blues, jazz, all this R&B, all this great stuff, and it's like, when we get a press release about a mainstream big name, and then we hear the word like R&B influence, like a Florida Georgia line, I want to jump off a bridge.
Right.
Because when they're trying to do I'm like, no, this ain't it. Like this, I listen to R&B growing up. I listen to rap growing up. I listen to a lot of stuff.
Man, we all
I
did.
listened to some of your stuff early on. You talking about R&B, like I get it. I get how you kind of mesh that into like now you're being like a real deal country artist, but I can hear it in a way that's not offensive in any way. That's like a guy in the mainstream country charts making $30 million a year being like, yeah, we just want to do some R&B stuff to change, like
slapping on a beat that they made in a lab,
right? Like that pisses me off. And I don't know, does it piss you off? Maybe not piss you off, but we got to be kind of critics sometimes, so it kind of like annoys us,
right?
Where it's like, hey, we've met a lot of artists that make a lot of money that we know don't sing the style of music they want to sing.
Right.
To put it that way.
Sure.
As well. And then they try to do, oh, this is cool, this R&B stuff. Like, oh, let's put some R&B stuff. You're a couple of guys that don't even know the first thing about R&B. You do. That's why I like it. Does that make any sense to you?
Well, yeah, man, like
chasing money, I guess, but
I see these, well, I would argue in some ways that the business has always been like that. And a lot, as hard as that is to maybe believe sometimes, is that I spent a lot of time, just riding up and down the highway, especially these last 2-3 years, because I'm just playing nonstop, a couple hundred shows a year. And so, sitting on the bus or before that in RVs and vans and whatever, I've literally gone through in like the 1960s and just looked at all the #1 hits on the different weeks in country and pop and all this different stuff, and just roll through them, or do it in blues in the 30s and 40s. Look at the chart. Look at the charts. It's amazing. It's interesting how much of that music that was at #1 in the 50s, I don't think was any good. Like same thing in the 60s. There's all this stuff at the top of the charts that doesn't seem that good. Take the Americana charts where I exist right now. All right. And this is myself included. I'm not saying I'm anybody special. Those charts don't have much to do with what's really impacting Americans. It doesn't. It has more to do with the game being played by a certain segment of the industry and those social networks. And maybe that's not a kosher thing for me to say in some people's eyes. But what I'm saying is it's just like that. Like y'all probably interviewed all kind of people, and I know y'all dig into a lot of really great independent artists like myself that, like, are they on the charts right now? No. But 25 years from now, are we going to be talking about a lot of these weird clap track, fake hip hop country songs?
We're not.
No, we're going to be talking about a lot of the people that were doing, and a stack of cats that I know, and a lot of hardworking gals making great music, flying under the radar, that people are going to look into later down the road. Because, like, okay, who's the most famous Delta blues player in the world? If you could think of, like, who is that guy from way back? Who's the most famous one? Robert Johnson, right? Robert Johnson had no radio success. Nobody knew who he was. He died in obscurity. Now nobody can even name anybody else from his era.
Yeah.
You know,
and all the great blues players cite him as the biggest influence in their life. So,
and he never sold more than 5,000 copies of, like, in a regional, like regional radio stations in the 30s. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. And it's like, I see, and so there's that aspect of it that's like the big ivory tower business, you know, and it's like bright and shiny, and it's like you watch a bunch of stuff on TV every day or see advertisements for stuff. You don't care about it, but that's what's getting pushed, and we're oftentimes getting forced to choose between a bunch of things that we don't really like any of them, but we're gonna go with this one because it's the most that we can. It's what we can stand of the options, right? That happens a lot. Well. And then on the other side of it, where I climbing out of, is there's another aspect where, like, which is really funny to me. I see people coming at me right now that are like, this guy ain't no genuine country star. I can see here, look at this video footage of him playing in subway cars 9 years ago with the beanie on. Like, see, he's not authentic. And I'm like, damn, so you think me playing in subway cars is a sign of my inauthenticity? Like, please go tell all your friends about how I got here, you know, because they may not all agree with you. So it's like a combination of this weird world of, it's like some people want to only see somebody that looks just like them, puts the same clothes on, appears to have the same job, come out the same thing, and they listen to this person because they're like, he or she is just like me. And then way up here, you got all these weird pop and country stars that they're unrelatable. Like, I played at Stagecoach once, and let me tell you what, playing at Stagecoach in the back of that thing, you can't even tell who an artist is most of the time. Like, you can't. And I really don't mean that with disrespect. I just couldn't identify who was an artist, you know?
Who's an artist, who's a manager, who's a fan, who's a groupie, who's stepping
out of the gym wearing whatever the hell is being sold in a magazine. You can't tell. Yeah. Now, and that's not just country music. That's a lot of stuff out here, you know? And so it's like, and I'm somebody who, you know, I stepped off of complete obscurity street life in 2015, you know? So, like, I'd never heard of Americana music, man. It didn't mean anything to me, you know? All the genre classifications, the country genre classification, from the standpoint of how y'all have to deal with it with pop country, that doesn't mean anything to me. I'm not saying I'm not trashing it. It just doesn't mean anything to me.
Does Americana, you know, like, vibe with you? Are you like,
Tyler Childers said something?
Because Tyler Childers is like, man, I make country music. I don't know why they keep calling me Americana. And
well, I don't necessarily, I don't subscribe to his viewpoint either. I think that if they're recognizing you, right? Like, well, you got to realize that the business throughout time is classifying and putting people in boxes and genres. Like, what do you want them to do? You know, like, there's no genre, there's no classification. Like, I would argue that a lot of people saying they're playing country compared to what I see as country, even those people claiming that they're country, I don't think they are.
Yeah.
Like, I'm being really honest. Like,
who?
It's I'm just saying in general. Like,
I know, I'm busting your balls a little bit.
Oh, well, no, it's like, I understand what Tyler is saying about the challenges being faced by people making real authentic music like he is and a lot of other people. And you're dealing with this plastic industry that is a hollow void in a way, I think, is what he was staring down.
Yeah.
But look, man, I don't care what they call me or they classify me as or whatever. Like, if you showing up at the dance, that says something about you. Like, you're showing up there to dance, you know, like no offense to a guy like Sturgill Simpson, but like, I have a hard time understanding why he paints a picture of not caring all the time, but he's like raging against the system and producing other artists and like protesting outside of a country music award shows. These are all things I would never do. Like, I don't think it's that he doesn't care. I think he cares more than anybody, you know, and that doesn't make him wrong. You know, I think he struggles with why his authenticity isn't being, you know, rewarded by like a larger system, you know, and like that's, who knows? He would probably totally disagree with me, but it's like, which is fine. You know, I don't agree with most people myself, but like what I'm saying is I didn't know what Americana was, but they start calling me that. And those are if not for the Americana charts, I wouldn't even be on a chart, man. I wouldn't even be on a chart, you know? And it's like, well, like this argument of who's more country this, who's more country that, or whatever, you know, is like, it's for the birds, man. Cause like I said, good luck to everybody on how America sees you in 25 years, you know, like I know where my catalog stands at, and I don't care whether the Americanas, you know, because I see people literally criticizing the Americanas and they have nothing negative to say about the Grammys. The Americanas are a mini version of the Grammys, you know, like it's all a put on. Like
he has a,
you know?
I don't know if you heard, did you make the quote up or as far as country music and what's country, what's more country? You're like, it's like porn. Did you hear that from somewhere?
That was a judge, a Supreme Court judge talking about porn, but it's like, I know it when I see it. That was the definition.
It was like, I know it when I see it.
I know it when I see it.
I know it when I hear it with country. It's kind of like, look, I can say I enjoy a pop country song. That's like,
sure.
I'm not going to say it's the next coming of Waylon Jennings or anything, Merle Haggard. But I'm like, this is catchy. This is fun. If you're getting fucked up and this song comes on, okay, fine, cool. I'm not angry, but I'm not sitting here saying it should win a Grammy for best song. Sometimes people get upset when you say that, and then I'm like, well, yeah, I can listen to that, but I much prefer to listen to Tyler Childers or whoever on the more traditional side. And then people even now are like, oh no, Chris Stapleton, he's not country. Like they get upset now when we
too blues, he's too rock.
It's like who cares, man? Isn't a lot of the music just better than a lot of the alternatives? Sometimes you just should accept it as being like, holy shit, we went through a bad phase in like the mainstream country world where it was just nonstop bros singing about like tailgates and all that stuff, as you know. And it's nice to hear some of these traditional sounds coming back to
it really is
to the rest of the country, right? It's just like,
well, it's like when you take somebody like Brother Tyler or Culture Wall and these people. The thing is, this is deeply honest music,
right.
And the people that they've built audiences playing for know that that's honest, you know, and that's what I respect those guys for. Sturgill Simpson too, you know. I mean, he can be as crazy as he wants to be, and the music that he's made is there, you know, and that says something, you know. And then there's another world, like you're saying, these bro country people, like that's a whole other world. But somebody like me, man, like I'm polarizing, like I really am. The debate about people that like listen to these guys that are seen as like traditionalists, you know, a lot of them don't accept me. And then a lot of people in that pop scene or whatever, like I'm just outside of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I do think that I'm really totally different than these people in this conversation, you know, and it's really coming from another place that I think my music is country, but I think I'm coming from a completely different place. That 70 years ago, where I'm coming from looked more like a lot of these other people. Today, I think it's hard for me to find somebody else like me, you know, doing it this way, you know, because like when I talk about country music, it could mean so many things, like folk music, American music from an earlier era, like a lot of stuff that got classified as race records but earlier was country music. Hillbilly music was similarly categorized in like race records and not having anything to do with country mainstream back before a certain time. But it's like the type of country music that I record is a lot more traditional actually than even these people that are being crowned as traditional country folks. I would say that they fit more into a more modern alternative version of like country and like alternative rock than I do, and there's all these weird categorizations that they use, but like I think I'm bringing classic and traditional country with me way more than most of these cats, because like I learned how to play all that stuff on the street for a decade. I'm not faulting them for not doing that, but I will say, did they do that? No, they did not. They did not, like, and that's just, I'm not patting myself on the back. You just have to ask yourself, well, where are all the rest of those people that did that? They're out there. They exist. You know what I mean? But this is a crazy hard business. And like, it's not that I'm unique in my ability. It's that I'm unique for playing the street game and making it onto the parlor floor, man. That's
You're
like the most
unique. Cut you off real quick. The biggest thing I think that I've experienced in doing this business is like, you're also unique because you didn't quit. You didn't stop. And the vast majority of people in your position, working, like playing on the streets or whatever, or traveling or doing whatever, they stop, they quit. They get one no, they get two no's, they get three no's, they go, I'm done with this. I'm gonna go lay concrete. I'm gonna go do roofing. I'm gonna go back to the family business. I'm gonna go get my degree. I'm gonna go do this and that. I knew that wasn't for me. You knew that wasn't for you. He knew, like, he dropped out of law school when I said, all right, we can do this. You can work full time now. And we, two best friends, aren't doing this. So it's like that. I think that's like a big tell too, man. And it's just like, I love your honesty about a lot of that, because it's refreshing because I'll tell you what, like, you don't hear it a lot. You just don't. Like, a lot of people.
No, everybody's politicking and trying to do like what's safe, and
Oh, there you are.
Whatever's safe and whatever, and I do have to be careful for certain things, but like there's a thing they used to say when we were on the street in New Orleans all the time, and it went a little bit like this. It was like, the man driving the streetcar could play you under the table. Like, meaning that there's the talent of the ordinary everyday folks just driving the bus, getting you down the road, may have an innate ability beyond anything I myself could imagine. And like, you're right, man. I appreciate you saying that. Like, when I just think about how many people, like, in my position, or positions way more difficult than mine, like, you never find out like what you're really worth or how good you really are, because everybody's telling you can't do it. And the reason people are telling you can't do it is because people themselves aren't taking those chances. That's the main reason people tell you can't do something, is because they themselves are afraid to take those risks. Or a lot of times with family, people in your family want you to follow in their footsteps to give meaning to their life sometimes.
Yeah.
And those are tremendous things to overcome. And I just think about somebody like me spending my entire 20s playing in the street. That's why I'm saying, like, I got nothing against all these other people, and I don't need people to be from the street and have my background to respect them. It ain't like that. I really don't have that. It's just, I feel like I'm doing something really different than these other cats. And the only reason anybody's seeing that is because of all that time that I stayed out doing it my way without getting shaped, or people being like, nah, you're too rough around the edges, man. You should go get a day job, and being like, oh, okay, I'll go get a day job. I mean,
right.
That just doesn't ever change. That just doesn't ever change, man. It's like, there's two kinds of Americans. There's Americans that say they're free, and then there's another type of American who is free. And, some people got it a lot harder than others, and we got a lot of structural issues in America and all that kind of stuff. But it's amazing. It's amazing what can be done here in the mind if you can kind of release yourself from, like, a prison that you create yourself. And there's a goal to create that mentality, but like, and it's hard and it can be invisible, but you can break it because it's really just you, you know. There's that whole thing where it's like the noose used to be around your neck and then they just moved it up over your head, you know, over your head, like emancipate yourself from mental slavery, you know. And I'm not saying that the man is enslaving you. I'm saying it's self-imposed on some level, you know, because I can control that. Everything, the other things I can't, you know. And you know,
Yeah, I mean, profound.
that's country. That's country to me,
Yeah.
you know.
Right, yeah, right. Like,
Album and then close it out.
yeah, new album coming out tomorrow. What's just quick and dirty motivation? What's the story, the theme? What are you trying to say with this
Welcome
one?
to Hard Times, which is very fitting of a
Yeah,
title
absolutely. Like,
with the craziness.
Oh man, I mean, we're going. You know, I think everything I've told y'all, you can hear it poured into the album. I wrote that song, "Welcome to Hard Times," back in November. You know, I didn't need the revelations of 2020 to sing about these things. Obviously, as y'all know from me telling you about my life. But I really felt like I needed to make the type of country record that I hadn't seen being made. Because, and that's the thing, I'm not trying to put this against anybody out there, you know, because everybody's got their own path, and no two folks that make it in this business path look the same. Even the weird pop people, they all get here different ways. They really do, but it's like, nobody seems to look much deeper than mid-70s outlaw country music, you know. You know, which to me was like when it really started. If you talk to people like Mark Neal that I made this record with in South Georgia, who to me is the only living country music producer who's even anywhere near the level of the people that created that sound in Nashville and Bakersfield and Texas and Georgia back in the day. He's the closest thing to that. That's why for all the other people I could have worked with on this record, I decided to work with Mark Neal, because he was the only one that wanted to make a record like this one that I made, which is, when you talk to people about country music when it was a high art in the 60s, 50s and 60s, a high art, the storytelling, the melodrama, the sadness that could be conveyed in a like blues, like it is blues. George Jones, short-haired Willie Nelson, Roger Miller, all of these people describe the way that they sang country music as singing the blues. All of them. Hank Williams described himself as a blues singer, you know, because blues is bad feelings, but the way you get them out makes people feel good. And that's why I'm talking about that high art of like a dark country of the 60s.
yeah.
When you talk to the people that know how that music was made and what it took back when you signed a record contract and the label had you make 4 records a year instead of dragging out 1 record 2 years in the business that it is today, like, they'll tell you that the fall of country music was the outlaw era. Because it's not that that wasn't cool music that they were making, but look what directly preceded it. That was commercial interest just overtaking country music. And pretty soon you get a few years later and country music was gone. You know, it was gone, or it was just so mainstream and huge, or whatever you want to call it. And anyway, I'm sitting here preaching. I sound like somebody on a high horse that knows something. But what I'm saying is that I wanted to make a record that showed that country music, not, you know, this independent country of today that, in my opinion, itself is built on people that don't really even know the roots that go way deeper than that, you know, like, and I can hear that in folks, you know, is that
For sure.
I'm like, yeah, I see y'all over here talking about real country and all this type of stuff, but I'm looking at you like you don't know anything about it either, you know. And that's not somebody who got some education about all this type of stuff. This is somebody who was standing out in the street and found out about the heritage of American music, which is folk music. And folk music is black, it's white, it's all these things together that you can find on the street, and that was in Appalachia and New Orleans and in Texas. And I just feel like I would like to see more young people carrying that with them, you know, and bringing that to the front. And I think that there is a movement that's happening with, but I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that go deeper, you know, because I think anybody doing anything new is bringing heritage to the front and then putting the modern times on it as a modern person. And I don't know if my record does that effectively, but that's what we was trying to do without thinking much about it, just doing it, you know. And Welcome to Hard Times is a song about the casino, you know, and I don't think that there is anything but a casino in America, you know. And it's like, well, do you know how the casino works?
It's a great analogy.
Or do you not know how it works? Cool, it doesn't matter. You're in it anyway. So,
yeah. I mean, and you put out 3 of the songs, so like Run Horse Run and Don't Cry and then Welcome to Hard Times, all awesome. Listen to them a bunch, and I think this podcast will either go up tonight or it'll go up the day the album comes out, but people are I think they're gonna enjoy it quite a bit. I think they're gonna enjoy hearing your story, because a lot of our listeners and viewers and website visitors and all that stuff, it's working people, it's people that kind of want an escape, and then like a guy like you is just a breath of fresh air for me.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people we talk to grew up with a silver spoon up their fucking ass. I'm not talking about necessarily people on the podcast, but in general, in the Nashville mainstream music industry, it's maddening for us that some of the stuff we hear. So talking to a guy like you, for me, was like, or just not even just listening to your story was pretty awesome. And hopefully we can do this again. Hopefully when COVID is controlled a little bit, we can do this in person and hang out and watch you perform live and all that stuff soon too. But we can't thank you enough for joining us.
Oh no, man, the pleasure belongs to me. I'm sorry I missed y'all earlier, man. Like, I'm used to, like, you know, having help, like getting it's not that I don't have help. It's just, like I said, I'm used to just like being parked behind a venue. I got this schedule.
Oh, right.
My tour manager, David Wilson's all over my ass about everything I need to do.
It's a little different these days, yeah.
It's so different because it's like I'm just not organized in that way, you know. I'm organized to like play the show,
right.
And like, you know, when I do talk to people, I'm like, all right, it's time to box, you know. And then like, but my organization skills for the other stuff aren't as good. But yeah, and maybe that's part of how I ended up on the street too, man. I just couldn't.
I don't know.
I just couldn't take care of myself.
It's all good. It's all good.
No,
man.
I'm just saying, you know, like a lot of the problems that I had with like trying to live a life in America, like I was told to live, like I just wasn't any good at. And so I landed in the street. That's why some people say, like Hank Williams or a lot of these people that I respect, entertainers like us, it's a career of last resort in some ways, you know. And like, that's what I meant about boxing, is like, you tend to find great fighters that don't have a choice but to fight. And so I appreciate y'all taking some time for my story. And I'm going to be following along what you guys are doing. I've never seen any of y'all's podcasts, but now I'm going to see what kind of crazy stuff's in there.
I mean, we've had a lot of fun and done a lot of the video ones recently, but I mean, super refreshing, like I said, with you, like to hear it that way. And I'm telling you, there's no other backstory like yours. Yeah, like it's absolutely, that's completely
compelling, just compelling.
It's just super motivational. I mean, for me, if I was a young person that's listening to this, that's 19, that's trying to figure it out, and I listen to you and your story. We didn't even really touch on the heart surgery. People can read about that. You had that in 2019. It's like, you've had some crazy shit and you're still a young guy and you're just now coming into your own. So it's like super motivational without you sitting there pumping your chest and trying to be some fucking motivational speaker on Instagram. You know what I mean? So it's like, so it's kind of nice because there's a lot of artists that couldn't hold your jock when it comes to the music, that post a lot of motivational stuff on Instagram that means nothing. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So we appreciate it, man. And hopefully we can do this again soon, like I said, in person. If not, jump on again in a few months and we'll just hang out and shoot the shit again. But
Yeah, man. Hopefully we're
Anytime.
back to playing. Hopefully we're back to playing, and I can show y'all what I'm best at. Because sometimes I just be rambling on and on with my.
You're a great talker, dude. And
I'm glad you think
we love
so.
the story. We love the story, dude. We'll talk to
Okay,
you soon.
brothers.
Thank you. And we'll
No,
be
pleasure
posting
belongs to me.
tomorrow. We'll be posting everything and the album and all that stuff. So,
Man, I appreciate that. That's big. That's a big help to me.
cheers, man.
Right on. Thank you, Charlie.
See you, man.
Okay, guys, y'all have a good one.
You too. See you, man.
Peace.